promoted on LinkedIn, I saw, with a law firm, sports law.
I put it on a couple of things. Basically, I got asked to be part of a panel discussing the kind of judiciary, the legal framework around rugby, given my kind of extracurricular stuff at the minute. I actually also got asked to jump in last minute to one yesterday on contracts and stuff, which was really interesting, given what's going on with COVID and the salary cap regulations and stuff like that. And then today's one was quite interesting because obviously Matera, the Argentinian captain, who's just been kicked out of the team but welcomed back into the team after the things he put on Twitter 10 years ago, and whether, like, basically the implications of that, whether that's good or bad, or what we thought about it. So someone banging at the door. Wait a sec. Sorry about that, mate. So
interesting material with when you go digging 10 years back into people's Twitter accounts and things like that.
Yes, yeah, there's dangerous stuff to find. And also, one of the guys was Chris Quinlan QC, who is head of the ILB World Rugby Judiciary. So he's basically the bloke who, under no circumstances, is allowed to talk about this case at all, because it's obviously a live, ongoing kind of disciplinary process. And two of the panelists, one was Leon Lloyd, one was James Bailey, both former players who now both serve as World Rugby disciplinary panelists, and potentially will be invited to be on the panel for his hearing. So they couldn't comment either. So it's basically me and a couple of other lawyers just being like, rah, 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 rah.
You had to do the talking for 6 people between 3 of you.
Yes.
Nice challenge, mate. So you're well versed in presenting today, then, or probably bloody.
Yeah, bloody love it. What? So what is it? What is it you want? You want to chat about today?
Really, it's just your story and how you transitioned, through growing up in Bristol into Bristol Uni, and your choice of degree, and how you balanced your studies and life in rugby, and then talk about how you came out the back end of it. Obviously, I'll give you a quick intro. Bristol debut, Gloucester, Bath, and then back to Bears. About England, just so the guys have got like a rough context, because not all of them will know your full background.
Right.
Just give them clarity on the funding you've done, which have been brilliant for the rugby club, and also for is it a school of something? What was I looking at? Clinical sciences, isn't it?
Clinical neuroscience,
yeah.
So, I'll tell you what's probably sensible. If I kind of give a headline brief, and the guys can either I mean, how many have you got on it? It was like 8 or 9, is it?
Last time there was about 50.
Oh, nice. If we get a good number, then get guys to say at the start, like, look, anyone wants to know anything specific or whatnot, then by all means just type it into the chat box, and we can kind of go back and say, like, we can kind of elaborate on things further. If there's stuff that I've mentioned that people want to know more about, if there's stuff I haven't talked about that people want to know more about, then like tell them that at the start, and then just as we go, we can fire stuff in. If anyone has got a burning, they need to get it out now, and just tell them to pipe up, kind of thing. But
you'll get the random questions. So the big point of this is to show that someone with your intellect can actually balance successly, playing rugby and then moving forward.
Or certainly appear to.
The hockey boys, still better lads.
Well, Dave Rowland said you could do it, so.
Dave Rowland is a top boy.
Yeah, I missed that fucker. He's in the trenches right now in the NHS, mate.
Yeah, I do not envy him. My brother's wife is like an NHS physio, and she basically got repurposed with COVID to be like a COVID nurse, and she was properly like getting flagged on all fronts. It was savage.
Yeah, it's not.
Simon.
I guess with the conversation around just your learning and that process through uni and rugby, but then you're bound to go and get a load of questions around your career, like who's the best players you played with and against. I guarantee there'll be a few of them asking, you know, what do you push in the gym? What's your best PB on your bench press?
the key things.
The really important big stuff.
Yes, yeah.
What's your squat best? You know, it'd be interesting.
Is this them or is this you?
Sorry? I've never been an advocate of benching because I could never do it.
You're like, what's your calf raise?
Absolutely. My interests are more around the coaching, as you might have guessed. So to talk around, you know, your learning around. The other big one here is leadership and ownership for these guys. Yeah. And, you know, we've got the biggest impact for me on COVID at the moment is that the guys, the pups aren't playing with the big dogs. And so the leadership and the organization, the time management, the understanding of the game, the understanding of the environment and people, just all of the learning that goes on that you get from being with a third or fourth year or a fifth year medic, etc., that you would normally experience, just they're not picking it up. Second years aren't picking it up because of COVID. We've had a year out of it. And it's a huge impact on the transition stuff and the succession planning for next year. I've already got with a club captain who's not showing up tonight, which says everything.
Yeah. Well, you can talk. There's quite some good stuff you can talk about effective communication and the kind of character of the team, and in kind of restricted environments and testing environments, how you can best practice to expedite that. Obviously, from our point of view, it's not just a case of you want to win games. It's a case of if you don't win games at the end of the year, people are let go, they're made redundant, your job is finished. And so the stakes are higher for us, so performance of the team is paramount. So there's some stuff we can talk about with how we in Bristol, but in Premiership Rugby or professional rugby in general, kind of affect significant leadership and stuff like that.
Yeah, that'll be fantastic. Absolutely superb. I imagine you got some bad examples and some good examples as well.
Yeah, good and bad examples of coaches and mentors and players and how people get on and manage themselves. Say again?
I never asked you about how you got on with Fordy.
Mike Ford is one of the best coaches I've worked with.
Or with people?
He is one of the worst man managers I've ever worked with. He was genuinely one of the best coaches. I probably wouldn't say this on the record, so say, because things get taken out of context there. But certainly, I'm not shy of that opinion. I think technically he was one of the best coaches I've worked with. I really felt like he understood what he was trying to achieve in the game. But I just felt like his relationships with people was what undermined him in that position.
It was fascinating to watch because obviously that's when I kind of met you, besides the uni stuff, is I had shadowed him from Newcastle right through to the director role and back down again. And then, you know, really good terms with him. Now I pop up to see him in Leicester as well. And listening to his learning, you know, through going to Toulon, similar experience to you, diving off to Toulon, all that change of environment and culture again. And then it worked with the USA and Germany and then coming back to Leicester Tigers. Yeah, I think he's definitely learned more, I would say that from my book conversation, but we won't know that until we see him back in such roles again, I think. Yeah. If ever we do.
There's a lot of people going, oh, someone's just been sacked at Leicester. Isn't Fordy at Leicester?
Mate, I'm seeing it everywhere, that knife in the back stuff. I'm not saying that was the case. I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but
no.
Even the man in charge of Bath could be accused of that right now.
Well, there's no accusing going on. I think there's plenty of people saying that we're past accusing.
Yes. Right, mate. We've got 15 in the waiting room and no doubt a few houses. So I'll bring them in. See, I mean, we'll probably wait another 3-4 minutes. Say good evening to all. Gallery view is on.
You want to come a bit nearer? Right, sit on the bench.
Right. Wash those plates.
Who's washing up?
Yeah, anything.
Evening, gents. Can you hear me? Thumbs up. Yes. A good start.
Has he turned up?
Dave turned up. Yeah, Dave's
the first for everything.
You make sure you give him some banter back in a minute, mate. Who we got on here?
I love that some have turned up in ties. That's so professional.
Good clubmen, aren't they? Good clubmen.
Solid clubmen.
Mate, I don't know if you've seen the Instagram stuff that's been going on, but I don't know where he is. Look for George Gadsby on the screen right now. Probably the fittest man in the club, right? How many, George, can I get you off mute? Go on. Yeah, how many Murphs have you done? How many Murph cross?
Well, throughout each day of lockdown, for 4 weeks, I did a Murph a day, which have got quite challenging in the end. But they're quite slow, but got through them.
Strong.
I sort of,
obviously, all the lads today, pitched in and joined you for that.
They did actually, yeah. Usually had a guest appearance each day. So not everyone was keen to do it. Sorry, no, they
to do it or just to watch you do it.
No, if they joined in, the ones who joined, quite a mixture of positions as well, which is good. Yeah.
Oh well, fair play. That's not no mean feat.
Oh.
Freddie Adams alive. Good to see Freddie. Is that a full beard on the way there as well as the mo?
It's something that vaguely resembles facial hair, yeah.
Drawn on with a mascara pen.
Brutal.
The chest touch is still going strong though.
Well done. Well played. We've got Mark Clark, we've got Choice Stocks. Morgan's in, George D, good. We'll give it just a couple of minutes, guys, just see if anybody else joins in. There's a good number of you here. There's about 25 or something online, I think, and then numbers in rooms. The Hugh Morris connection there, those first years with the Welsh flag in the background. There's one Scottish lad in there who's not happy about it.
Is that like arts and crafts, Dave? You drawn that yourself, lads?
It's my flag, got to represent it. Hugh pretends he's Welsh, but he's not really Welsh.
Right, fair.
He's a
Who pretends to be Welsh?
What do you want to say now?
The best. All the best people.
Just by name. Okay, guys, it's coming up. Yeah, so we're 5 minutes in, and I can add anybody in from here. Just to let you know, we will record from here on. So keep the language nice and polite. I'd like to welcome Dave Attwood as a UBRFC alumni and current Bears lock forward. And thank you very much for joining us, mate. For those of you who don't know much about Dave, he attended the university to study physics and philosophy. Do correct me at any time in this, Dave. Just a little bit of homework I remember picking up on you. Went on through to play England 18s, England 20s as well.
Yeah. During
that time, and then went on to play for Bristol in 2007. Is that correct on the debut?
Yeah, debut. I joined the academy 2006.
Right.
Senior team 2007, and then as soon as I got relegated, I buggered off up the rest.
You covered all of the Southwest clubs except for Worcester and Exeter. You've done a good job.
Yes.
There. So, Gloucester 2009, Bath in 2011, a brief stint in Toulon, and back to the Bears in 2019, and an England debut. I've got 2009, 2010.
Yeah, I think 2009 I played England Barbarians, so they're kind of Saxon sets for the time, and then 2010 was my first cap.
Yeah, and Dave's very kindly contributed to the rugby club various occasions every time he's been capped to help fund numerous resources and bits and pieces. So I and you are no doubt certainly grateful for his very kind support. So really what we're going to do, guys, is slightly different format to Sam Jeffrey's session a couple of weeks ago. Dave's just going to tell you a bit more about how he managed life, studies in rugby as he moved through the university, and talk about a little bit about his professional career and the story and where he is now, and also what he's going on to, because quite an exciting time for him with regard to moving towards the laws. I don't know which specific area you're going to go into, Dave. I'll let you add some detail on that one. But if you've got questions, guys, as we go through this one, just unmute. The chat will go chaotic and we'll be full of banter like last time. So unmute and just politely ask a question in your own time this time, guys. And we'll try and run through everything in roughly an hour. And if it goes over, then Dave can tell us to bugger off at some point, because I'm sure he's got more important things to do. But the floor is yours, sir. Thank you ever so much for joining us.
All right. Well, thanks so much for having me, Joe. Thanks for having me, guys. Sorry again for last week. Happy to hold my hand up there. Complete balls up. So as Joe said, I went to Bristol. I was Bristol born and bred, born in the BRI. I was never desperate to leave home particularly. So I went to Bristol Uni, although I went straight into halls of residence. Where I met my best mate, who I haven't been able to get rid of, and he now lives with me again. Unfortunately, he's a hockey player. He's an absolute belter. So I went to Bristol. Started in 2005, 5. He's also my PA. And like you say, rightly said, I studied physics and philosophy. So I started on an M.Sci course, so a four-year degree. And in my first year, I was playing with Bristol Rugby. So I was on an academy contract. I lent on some of my contacts in the rugby club to ensure that I got a place in halls of residence, because it's not very common for Bristolians to get a halls of residence place. So I managed to secure that. But in my negotiation with Bristol Rugby to sign a senior contract, I dropped down from an M.Sci to a BSc. So it's my decision to drop down from a 4-year course to a 3-year course to enable me to embark on a more full-time basis. Because the reality of it, certainly back then, and I would probably argue more so now, is that once you fully embark on professional sport, you cannot also fully embark on education. That doesn't mean you can't do it on the side like I'm doing now. I'm back at university now, studying a degree part-time while I'm playing rugby, but certainly full-time it wouldn't have worked. So I dropped down to a BSc. I was very fortunate at the time in the bloke who is in Joe's position now was one of the academy coaches at Bristol Rugby, a guy called Ben Sternham. And he was very hands-on in ensuring and managing my schedule to allow me to play for the university as much as possible, to train with the university, but also to get in all the work I could with the rugby club, and then play for the Bristol United or the A-League team on a Monday night or a Sunday night, whenever they could get those fixtures in. Certainly during my first year as well, I was playing club rugby for the Dings Crusaders in Bristol. So I was potentially running out 3 times a week, which nowadays the RPA would have a head fit. But back then it was like you basically got to go on the piss 3 times a week. So it worked for me. The standard of rugby wasn't exactly glowing. We had a couple of decent players in the uni team. Reece Priestland, who's now obviously Bath's fly half. He was a Bristol Uni student in my first year. He couldn't hack it and went back to Wales. Very common trait of the Welsh. So we only got to play with Reece for a year before obviously he came and joined me back at Bath. In terms of my schedule at uni, I'm sure you guys have found out yourselves that most lecturers don't really cut much quarter for you as a sports person. So you can't kind of get dispensation. They won't get extensions because I've got a Junior World Cup to go to. It's really important. They're like, I don't care. I need you to write me an essay about the planets. So that basically entailed that early morning, 6:30, 7 o'clock, I'd be going down to Coombe Dingle to work with some of the Bristol S&C staff for an hour and a half on my own. Come back to do lectures. I was in Wills Hall, so just up the road from the Dingle, and then I head back to Cumdingle to train with Bristol in the afternoon, then go back to lectures and go back. So I had quite a big impact on the amount of general work I was able to do with the university. So I had to try and pick that up elsewhere. And I think certainly the first year was a huge learning curve for me in terms of being a successful student, because it's one thing to be at university, but as most of you will undoubtedly know, you can be at university and you can be successful at university. They're kind of two different things. So certainly that first year was quite a big learning curve for me, and I had to lean on the university quite a lot to help support me there with SSC coaching and sports psychology mentoring and time management skills, all that kind of stuff. The university provided, which is one of the reasons why I felt indebted to the university and spent a large amount of time and money trying to find ways to give back, not just to the rugby club, but to the university as a whole, because I was very aware that rugby is a very privileged position. I take the piss out of Chris, my best mate, sat next to me, but he had to drive 2 hours on a Monday and a Wednesday to do some hockey training with his club, and then drive 2 hours back, and then go and do all the strength and conditioning here, and then coach university, and then play for the university at the same time. So to a large degree, rugby was quite privileged, and I'm kind of aware of that. So I try and help out the university on a wider area as well. Also, from a selfish point of view, it's a great networking opportunity. The university is full of very, very wealthy individuals. So if you can kind of contribute on some little level, that gets you in the room, and then you're talking with people who are the movers and shakers around the world. You're talking with partners at banks and law firms and property industries and marketing agencies, and you'd be surprised who's in the room once you cross that threshold. So you then don't have to stop with the charity knobs in the street who are like, sign up to save the homeless. You just walk past them guilt free, because you're giving to the university, helping out the lads, and also open doors for yourself. So there's a little tip for you. Bristol got relegated in 2009, and I had the option to stay in Bristol and try and help get the club out of the Championship and into the Premiership. And I decided that I wasn't interested in doing that. So the ship was sunk too far. So I went up to Gloucester, and after 2 years there, down to Bath, and like Joe says, a brief stint in Toulon, before back to Bath and eventually back home to Bristol, where I am now. Part of my contract when I came back to Bristol, I'd realised that while conversationally a degree in physics and philosophy sounds wonderfully upmarket and incredibly useful, it's not in any way. It doesn't give me any vocational skills at all. And coming out as a professional rugby player, like, that's not a hugely vocational career path. So there are some transferable skills, but you're taking all of that with a pinch of salt. So I'm now studying my GDL, General Diploma in Law. So I'm like a law conversion essentially, with the intention of going on to either pursue a career as a barrister or a solicitor advocate, hopefully around sports law. So for some kind of context, I was on a panel yesterday where we were talking about COVID-19 and the regulations, the salary cap reductions, the contractual position where rugby players were all in the position of walking away from contracts or potentially suing clubs because of breach of contract. And then today we were talking about the judiciary panel and the Matera, the Argentinian guy who's just been sacked as the captain of Argentina because of some discriminatory texts or tweets that he put out 10 years ago. He's now been reinstated, which is absolutely, I'm not going to say it's the right or wrong decision, but they shouldn't have banned him and brought him back. They should have either waited and banned him or waited and not banned him. But it certainly creates a more of a confusing mess to have done that. So we were talking about that today, conveniently, with the head of the World Rugby Judiciary Panel. So that was quite interesting. But that's the kind of areas of law I'm hoping to get into afterwards. So that's kind of a brief, I mean, really brief. I haven't really talked any international stuff. I haven't given you any fun stories about who the knobheads are and all that kind of stuff. So anyone who wants to know anything specifically, anyone who's heard a story and wants me to retell it or find some more information about stuff, please feel free to fire away. My experience of these things is, if you talk to a class of 5-year-olds, they will all come up with questions. If you talk to anyone over the age of 15, and not just students, but fully grown, independent, professional adults, they will all kind of sit on their hands and be like, I don't know what to say. So anyone who's got anything, please fire away.
Dave, I'll ask the first question then, because it'll be the boring, sensible one. A lot of these guys at the moment are trying to balance, their studies, their social life, rugby, the training, and that sort of stuff. What would you say are the 2 or 3 key elements for you when you were going through that helped you, successfully manage it? Was it, planning your diet and nutrition at the weekends, doing your shopping? Was it getting a calendar nice and organized over a month period or every week? What tips would you suggest the guys buy into?
I think one of the big things I've found in terms of time management particularly is set yourself uncomfortable targets and really work hard to stick to those. So, for example, we're off site with COVID and stuff like that. We can't go into lectures. I must confess, and I do this very begrudgingly, that my GDL is going on at UE. Thankfully, I don't have to go into UE, and I certainly don't say that to anybody. But they're all off site, so I can't go in and get any face-to-face tuition. So I've arranged to work with a personal tutor who is inconveniently based in Sri Lanka. So on Thursday and Friday mornings, I'm up at 5 o'clock in the morning to sit down and do face-to-face lectures for 2 hours. Now, once you invest in that, once you commit to that, and you set the schedule and you invest someone else in it, so he now has to turn up to these meetings as well, you force yourself to adhere to the schedule and you force yourself to pick up, and then you don't have to worry so much about making marginal gains every week, because that takes care of itself once you stick to the schedule. I think I was fortunate at university because I made friends with some people who were also sports people. And when you live with other people, you tend to adopt similar habits. That can be positive and it can be negative. You can spiral off the charts, but you also are competitive people. You work together, and if you're trying to get in shape, you're trying to do your Murph a day or whatever it is, then there's a lot of camaraderie there, and actually that can be a huge driver in making gains across the board. So I'd say your social circle is kind of the other really big driver in terms of trying to achieve progress there.
Great stuff. Guys, do you want to fire in them with a few questions? You're going to stick it out first. I'm going to start nominating houses.
Hi, Dave. Thank you for talking. Cheers, mate. I was just going to ask, who's the best player you played with and the best player you played against during your career?
Best player I played with, hands down, Semi Udrada. He's an absolute bloody freak. So when I through some shady background stuff that I'm still a little bit bitter about, I was sent on loan to Toulon, which ended up being an absolute dream. But for a while, I thought I was going to be loaned out to London Scottish, and I was absolutely fucking raging. But I got to Toulon, and there had this guy, and I absolutely confess, I had no idea who he was, really. I'd seen his name in some match reports and stuff like that, but I had no idea who he was. And there's this guy called, I mean, there was a team of absolute rock stars, but Semi Udrada came from rugby league, And in his first season in rugby union in top 14, he got the second most turnovers in the league. Now, when you think of Semi Radradra, you think he's an awesome ball carrier, destructive, offloading, tackles like a mutant. You don't think of him turnovers at the breakdown. But for an outside centre to get the second most turnovers in the entire top 14, I just thought was absolutely unbelievable. And then you marry that with the highlight reel, the stuff that he's started doing a little bit for Bristol, but that he can do. I'm super pumped to watch Fiji this weekend. Have you seen their backline? It's absolutely lit. I cannot wait. That's going to be pretty cool. But he's a very impressive individual, not just on the field. I think one of the things you realise is these guys that are absolute specimens and kind of freaks of nature in terms of what they can do on the rugby field. He's incredibly diligent around his match preparation, around his training. He's very, very thorough, very professional with how he approaches his body and how he looks after himself. And sure, he now earns an absolute mint playing rugby, but he hasn't always done. But he's always really taken good care of himself. He's always looked after his body, and he seeks medical advice. And he does a lot of kind of extra stretching and prehab and proprioception work and stuff like that, which is essentially what boils down to helping him do what he does. In terms of players I played against, I always remember my Bristol debut. I played against Bath, which is a huge deal for me, like local rivalry as a kid growing up in Bristol, sporting Bristol. My debut, I came off the bench against Bath over at the Rec with about 10 minutes to go. It was like I've got no idea what the score was. I imagine we were probably getting pumped because back then they were great and we weren't. But being as I was young and had no idea what I was doing, I basically sat at the front of the line out, and when they threw the ball in, I just jumped up and hoped for the best. I found that was a particularly strong technique at university level. If you just jack middle and front, then you're probably going to get 50% of their ball. Certainly if the hookers are anything like mine were. And Danny Grucock was jumping at the front next to me for Bath, and I stole the ball off of him. And for the next 10 minutes, he basically ran around the field beating the fuck out of me. Apologies for the language. Yeah, it literally every breakdown, every tackle, everywhere I was, there was this furious mutant of a bloke bending my fingers back and whacking me in the face and standing on my ankles, like everywhere. It was like a comedy sketch. I genuinely couldn't believe what was happening. And then after the game, just completely dazed. Like, what is if this is what it's like, I don't want to be part of. I think he's probably definitely, that always stands out to me as the player who I've found most intimidating to play against.
Do you ever speak to him about that, Dave? Because obviously he was.
Yeah, I've mentioned it a few times. He kind of laughs it off. If you speak to anyone else who's played against Danny Grucock, I don't think it was me. I think he just did that to everyone. I just felt like I was getting special treatment, but that was just how he was. But off the field, like, it's bizarre how nice and softly spoken and polite he is. But on the field, he was an absolute, just a horrible person.
Lessons in rugby, lessons about
Yeah.
people. How did? Yeah, we'll be editing that one. I'm assuming that's still going on. I just don't know anything about it.
Yeah, I'm sure nowadays it's like you'll have like an extra scoop of protein powder in your shake, and or you'll have to get to bed an hour early and increase your REM sleep.
Absolutely. Next question, guys. Far away.
Hi, Dave. You've obviously just won the Challenge Cup with Bristol, your boy club. I was wondering what your career highlight is, and if it is anything other than that.
I'll be honest. So one thing until winning the Challenge Cup that I'd never achieved in my career was winning a season trophy. So I'm very fortunate to play for England a number of times. Played in some big games over the years, but I'd never won a campaign trophy until the Challenge Cup. I don't really count the LV Cup because it's a bit like the Mickey Mouse Cup. No one really cares. But the Challenge Cup was actually a really, really meaningful one for me, because one of the things you realise, as you, certainly from a playing point of view, as you get through professional rugby, is you need a lot of things to go right to actually win on the day, and well, to have got to a final full stop, but to win on the day as well. And I've been involved in a number of finals in teams where you think all season we're amazing, and you get to the end and just things don't work out and you don't get that. So I think one of the things I've really learnt through my career is how difficult it is to win a proper season-long campaign trophy. So certainly that is absolutely up there with one of the most special things that I've achieved. I think your first proper cap for your country is something that you never forget. I remember. So my cap number is 1347, and it's like a number I'll always remember. It's now written on the wall at Twickenham, which is quite a special thing in the changing room. Everyone who's ever got a cap for England before is listed on the wall, and no one can ever scrub that out. It's there now, whether they made a mistake or not. I'm there. They can't get me off. I'm not leaving. But I remember walking out of the dressing room on that day. And so I'm sure loads of you have been to Twickenham before, but generally everyone's out in the car park before the game. No one watches the warm-up or anything like that. So when you're warming up for the game out on the pitch, the stadium's relatively empty, and you go back into the dressing room, and then by the time you come out for the anthems, the stadium's full again. And as you're kind of walking out of the dressing room, obviously all the pyrotechnics are going off, and the flames, and that kind of hazy mist as the flame stops, the heated air, and there's just this wall of noise, and it genuinely feels like the noise of the 100,000 fans is kind of distorting the air as you're walking out. You kind of can't see, everything's fuzzy. That was hands down the most special rugby moment for me. I mean, obviously beating Wales over at Cardiff is relatively run of the mill nowadays, but yeah, certainly I would say my first cap was the most special, but I think the most meaningful is definitely the Challenge Cup so far. Obviously, with big things this year, we've got Premiership to win and Champions Cup at the end of the year, so hopefully we'll have a couple more to add to that.
Dave, on those achievements and things, who would you say has been, played the most important part in your life in helping you, get to where you are? Or has it been more than one person, family and friends? It's not. It's
Chris is like, it's me, isn't it? It's me. I think the soppy answer initially is mum and dad. My parents are not sports people. They're not really interested in sports at all, but I was. And therefore, they invested a huge amount of their time driving me around to county trials in Dorset and Devon and Exeter and into Southwest trials and all this kind of stuff. And the amount of time that they had to take out of their lives to facilitate me playing, which looking back on was kind of meaningless rugby in terms of where I got to. I was let go I was involved with the Bristol Academy until I was about 16. And then they sacked me off. They were like, really don't think you're going to be any good. Thanks so much for your time, but go and become a real person. So it was only when I got to university that the club took an interest in me again, and that's where things kind of kicked off. So certainly mum and dad for ferrying me around. Without putting any pressure on you, Joe, I think probably your kind of forebearer, Ben Sternham, was one of the most influential people in terms of his investment in me. He recognised that I had something to offer, and he pushed me whenever he could, and he took time to ensure that I was able to go places and do things in terms of trials and performances. And he through his access at the university ensured that I played enough rugby to get on enough radars that somebody picked me up. And then after that, it was probably Richard Hill, who was the coach at Bristol at the time, who took a punt and said, "Oh, this kid looks like a thug. I think there's something useful there."
Love it. I didn't realise Ben Stenham was in this job because he actually finished his career, rather abruptly, didn't he? Through injury, because he was a big standout back row forward in his day. He went on that disastrous tour to Australia with Clive Woodward, and then kind of the injuries racked up for him there.
Yeah, he was very unfortunate in the earlier days of medicine, but he was one of the quickest back row forwards that ever played for England, which is no mean feat at 117, 118 kilos. But he was just doing some footwork drills one day, no contact or anything like that, and he ruptured his ACL and PCL in the same incident. And in the surgery to try and fix that, they managed to partially tore his MCL, or basically they made it worse. And essentially that ended his career. So at 26, 27, with kind of the world at his feet, his career was virtually ended. And I think for any professional rugby player, the transition to life after rugby is a difficult one, but it's made much more so when it happens at a time that you're not expecting. I think there's a degree, if you get to the end of a contract cycle, where you know for a while that you're going to be lucky to get another contract. And if it does, great, but you're certainly not expecting that. But if you're cut short through injury, then I think it's all the more abrupt. And I think he was fortunate in that Bristol found a slot for him coaching the academy, but he was also able to channel that kind of energy and frustration into something really positive, and that was through promoting some of us academy people.
Good story. Lads, next question. What have you got for Dave?
Goody, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
Hi, Dave.
Hello, Oliver.
Hello, Oliver. Does it say Oliver on there? That's embarrassing, isn't it?
No, you do.
That's embarrassing. I just want to ask you a little bit indirect question, really, about Ioan Lloyd. I've been watching that kid. He's stellar. And does he bring it at training? Do you see what I see and what everyone else is seeing? Is he?
Yeah, he's got naughty feet, hasn't he?
Yeah.
He is. If you listen to an interview with Ioan Lloyd, he's the most boring, dull. I am not an emotive speaker. I'm happy to say that I am. You could probably put me on at bedtime and fall asleep happily, but Ioan Lloyd is a different level of. For such a small guy, he's got the deepest voice in the world, but he's slow, bordering on dull, in terms of how he comes across, but he is incredibly skillful, like the ball in hand, but also in terms of his footwork. And like you say, he was very, very good for us against Worcester last week. But I think people saw a lot of that last year. We're in a fortunate position where we've got two very young, very, very capable 10s. Unfortunately, they're both Welsh.
I actually saw his. I watched his brother train today. I think he might be better. He's unreal.
Is he?
Yeah, Jack Lloyd. Yeah, he's 18. Incredible. Anyway, I bought.
Slimmy, what are you wearing?
Oh, it's like a snood. I apologise.
Do you want to turn the heating on, or
because I can't get a face mask to fit around my head, I have to use a snood.
Are you in public now? Are you?
Pardon? Yeah, I am. No, yeah. All right. Fuck off. Fucking hell.
I love the array of bottles. There's lads with beers. I think I saw a glass of wine a minute ago. A couple of people with water bottles, plate of chips. Just a wide array.
There's a few strong eaters and a few strong drinkers in this group. Have you got another question, guys?
Yeah, I've got one. So on the back of sort of that boring comment on Lloyd, who's the biggest rugby nose you know? Because we've got a few in the club. Who's the biggest rugby nose?
No, I can't say Oliver. That's not fair. The biggest rugby nose. Every club has got some proper weirdo fans. There's one at Bath called Raymond. Raymond gets like 4 changes of bus to come out and watch us train, or used to come and watch us train. He probably still goes to watch the lads train at Bath, because Bath train at a country house outside of the city, because They're posh snobs, and so Raymond gets the bus across every day. He works for the council, and someone got him sacked from his job because he was feeding the pigeons. But Raymond will stop you wherever you are and ask you how players are who left the club 5-10 years ago. People I never played with. Like, yeah, how's Skays? How's James Scabra? I've no idea, Raymond. He left the club 10 years ago. I genuinely don't know who he is. Yeah, Leon Lloyd, is he good? I've no idea. I've never met him. I know the name like you do, Raymond. That's it. But every club has got a small section of these, and I'm sure there used to be a guy. Actually, there used to be a guy. I don't know if he's still there. He would come down with. I'm guessing he was alumni from like the 70s or 80s, but he was late 50s, 60s, and would just stand on the sideline and watch games, and no one knew who he was. Like, he would never really talk to anyone. You go over and have a chat with him, you wouldn't get anything out of him, but he was mad keen on how the team were doing all the time. I quite like that though. It's part of rugby is weird noises that don't seem to know anything or anyone, but care massively about being involved.
I'm trying to work out who the biggest nose is in UBRFC at the moment. It might be Mac, having asked that question.
Hal Rose.
You reckon Hal Rose? Yeah.
Hamish McMillan.
No chance. Dave, do you mind if I asked around, we talked before coming on here as well around leadership and your lessons in leadership in different clubs that you've experienced, different cultures, different coaches, different leadership groups. If you could advise these guys on, how they can go about stepping up and taking that responsibility and the accountability of leading a club, leading a team, and driving the performance levels really within the university rugby team, what advice would you give them? What's been your experience of people doing a good job?
I think if you want to be effective, we talked about it briefly earlier. From a professional rugby point of view, you're trying to be as effective as possible at moving forward, progressing, developing in as short a time space as possible. And we talk quite a lot about effective feedback. So I use this analogy. If I have got an issue with something you do, your knowledge of your roles in the line-out, for example, and I tell you directly, I give you 10 out of 10 the most accurate, brutal, honest feedback I can, you will receive at very, very best 70% of that. Because you will say, oh, well, he said this, but I'm pretty good. There was a mistake on that one, so it looked like I didn't know what was going on, but I did know what was going on. You kind of make excuses for yourself, and you take 70% of it. But then if you put that once removed, so now take it that, say you're trying to give feedback to the team, and you say to me, can you have a word with the forwards? I think that they're not quick enough around their line-up movements. And I go and speak to the forwards, and I'm like, look, lads, we were looking at the line-outs. Joe thinks you're a bit slow across the ground. I agree. I think we could maybe be a little bit better there. And we've done some good stuff, but we can be much better. So what I've done there is your 10 out of 10 feedback. I've dropped it down to 7 out of 10 feedback, and I've delivered that to the lads. Now, if you then take this 70% rule, what people have taken on board is only 40%. And I say that because you have to be very aware of not just the feedback you give, but how you receive it as well. We are not in business to be friends. I play rugby with people and incredibly close bonds, and I'm very, very good friends with some of them. I respect almost all of them. But that is born out of professionalism. We want to win things. That's the universal thing. I don't care if Charles Piatal likes me as a person. I don't care if Semi Radradra wants to be my mate and we'll go out for a beer afterwards. Because the reality is, the most important thing to me is winning games, winning seasons, winning trophies. And if I'm concerned about being his friend, then I temper my feedback because I'm worried about how he takes it. I'm able to deliver him brutal, honest feedback that might offend someone else because he knows how to take it. He can understand that I'm trying to give him effective feedback. I'm not trying to be a dick and call him out in front of people. I'm just trying to say, look, this is the quickest way for me to get from point A to point B. That means you need to get something right. He can listen to that and be like, well, Dave's having a go at me. I don't like it. I mean, he said this and I can think about it. Or he can say, look, Dave thinks I should do this. I'll look at doing that. And if he does that and it works, then we move forward. And if he doesn't, he can push back straight away. But that kind of brutal honesty, that really clear feedback is a very difficult skill to obtain. It's one thing to talk about it, but it's very much another thing to be sat down with someone when they tell you something that you don't want to hear and to take it on board and to do something about it. So that kind of effective leadership is not necessarily just about giving the right messages, but it's also about listening to them and taking them on board, because otherwise there's so much noise that's lost along the way that you end up being ineffective, and what could have taken a week to sort out will end up taking 2-3 months, and in 5 months' time the lineup's still slow.
It makes sense. Certainly, it's something we've worked on. These guys might testify to with our process and coaching and bits and pieces at the moment. But good advice. Do you think it's something that you'll struggle with, or something you think you'll be comfortable with going into the real world once you finish rugby and as a solicitor?
I think it's a really difficult one, because in normal walks of life, people are insulated. They are emotionally in tune with people around them, and they don't take criticism. You'll know the kind of the changing room banter that you lads will have with each other. You can't go home and have the same kind of banter with your missus. You can't talk to your parents like that, because you're concerned about those personal relationships. Not that you think you're trying to be offensive, but you're concerned that they think you're being offensive. So what you can say to your mates, and it's not a problem at all, is not okay to say to your parents. And you're not saying it to your mates because you don't like them. They're your mates. That's the point. But I think it's something I'm very concerned about, being hauled up in front of kind of employment tribunals for sexual impropriety and stuff like that, because you struggle to adapt to speaking to people normally, because in normal office environments, it's not about performance at all costs. When we lose games, we lose to Northampton on Friday night, we lose to Claremont the week after, Connacht the week after, and then Harlequins on Boxing Day, then potentially there's players who are going to be out of the job. People's careers kind of get finished because we lost games and performance has dropped. So for us, performance is absolutely everything. So we have to find ways to be effective, and that means that we have to forego the niceties and not worry about people's feelings. Obviously, in an office environment, you can't do that because Tina's employed until she decides to leave. So you can't say what you want.
Sure. On that, then, when you
Can I just ask a quick question about that leadership, if you don't mind?
okay.
I just wanted to say, like, what you're saying about sort of leadership and like straight talking is really interesting. But I just wanted to ask, what would your advice be to like a leader within the uni team? So, if, like, for instance, there's been times where at like half time or during the game when I'm unhappy with something, but the person I've got to give a bollocking to might be my best mate, or the fact that I would care like what those people think about me in a different way off a professional, like out of a professional environment.
I think initially, if you're in a team environment, particularly in rugby, that has to be a conversation you have had before in terms of giving and receiving feedback.
Yeah.
People know that games are heightened emotional arenas. And if you've had the conversation beforehand across the board, that what you're concerned here with is kind of effective communication. And there also comes a responsibility, if you are delivering that feedback, that you reflect and review yourself with that. Because it's one thing to give someone a bollocking, it's two things to help fix the problem. Because you can be frustrated that the lads aren't running their piss-off lines with enough intent, and the defence are just ignoring them because they know they're not a threat. And you can get pissed off with lads and give them a bollocking because they're not working around the corner. But if you can do that in a constructive way, if you can give them some measure to work by where they can focus on an avenue to get better, can do something right. If you give them some basic things to look at to move forward, then it doesn't matter that you give them a tuck up, because you're trying to tap into that emotional side of things, because that emotion is the driver that's going to make them fucking get around the corner, whatever it is they need to do. But effective leadership is not throwing your toys out the pram and shouting and belly aching for the point of it. Don't get me wrong, sometimes there are times, but generally that is only ever relevant to situations where people aren't physically putting their body in places where they don't want to do. There is never a point where getting angry at someone for skill execution or knowledge of their roles is effective. You're not going to bollock someone because they didn't know the move, and then next time they'll know the move. That's just not going to happen. You can bollock someone because they are pushing out of tackles, and you can bollock someone because they are not working hard enough. And that is a very effective way of giving them motivation to do that. But the biggest motivation you can give someone is to tell them to come with me. When you're in a kick chase and you say to the guy, actually, come on, let's go, you will find that they run a lot quicker than if 10 minutes ago you told them to run quicker.
Dave, who's the best captain that you've played under, and who's the best coach or coach you've enjoyed working under the most?
The funniest captain I've ever worked with was Dwayne Vermeulen, the South African number 8. He was Toulon's captain when I got there. He'd been there for 3 years, refused to learn any French, like none. He wouldn't speak a word of French to anyone, not even the referees who were speaking to him in French. He wouldn't give team talks in French. It was genuinely absolutely baffling for me. But he is an incredibly capable rugby player, very, very effective. And he was able to lead much more by example than by his kind of language. I think Stuart Hooper was the Bath captain, was famed for his ability to captain. Unfortunately, that sometimes came at a cost of ability as a player, but he was a very effective leader. He spoke to people really, really well. He was intuitive around how to speak to some people. I think you'll know that there are some people you can be very direct with, and there are some people you need to put an arm around, and there are some people you need to kind of laugh them into submission. And he had a very good sense of that. He also knew where the line was in terms of getting the lads to let their hair down and have a bit of fun, but also when to maybe take things a bit more seriously, and also about when to do a bit more in the community or to be a bit more extracurricular. So I think they were probably up there in terms of captains that I've worked with. In terms of coaches, the best coach I've ever worked with, I still think, is Mike Ford. I've said this to you before, but he wasn't, for me, a very good head coach because he was just a terrible person. His management of people was awful. He belittled people and didn't know how to speak to young guys, and had a terrible sense of humour that never went down well. And he found it very, very hard emotionally of kind of connecting with people. And then you converse that with Gary Gold, who for me was an absolutely awful coach. His kind of ideas around what to do on the rugby field just didn't seem to marry up with anything I'd ever experienced or people around me had experienced in terms of effective rugby playing. But I would follow that man into battle any day of the year because he was an absolute top boy. And in terms of management, he was direct, he was honest, he gave you accurate feedback. He didn't pander around, he was upfront with you. If he told, we had every rugby team at the start of the season will probably brainstorm what's our character going to be like this year. Let's get some buzzwords. Come on, Emma, let's look around the room. Who's got the words for me? And you're like, oh, honesty and oh, I want integrity, and we want to be hardworking and diligent, and all these kind of words that you want to be recognised as. Your culture is going to be this. And one of the guys stood up and said, honesty. And Gary Gold, bearing in mind he'd been at the club about 4 months, and Mark McMillan, at 5 years he'd been at the club. Mark McMillan stood up and said, oh, honesty, we think what we really want this year from everyone is honesty. And Gary Gold stood up and was like, look, lads, if you want honesty, that's fine. But you got to be able to take honesty. Can you take honesty, Mark? And he was like, yeah. And Gary was like, right, I'll be honest with you. I don't think you're very good. And I'm not going to be renewing your contract at the end of this season unless you show me something really, really special this year. Because at the minute, I'm recruiting another number 9. Mark pregnant at the time, wife at home, I mean, brutal honesty, but actually incredibly effective.
Yeah.
Incredibly effective. And like, it might be upsetting to hear at the time, but I know plenty of players who have been kind of held on because the club are like, oh yeah, we think we're going to offer you a contract. We think you're going to offer you a contract. And then it comes to April, May, and they're like, oh, we're not going to offer you a contract. Well, now you're unemployed. And now you're trying to look around the Premiership for another club, only all the offers have dried up because everyone else has sorted their books out. So I think players much more, as tough as it can be sometimes, players much prefer to be direct.
Good shout. Guys, any other questions? It's a quiet one this evening.
Perfect.
Who's the biggest bloke you've been in a squad with?
Who's the biggest?
Yeah.
Biggest I've ever been with. Well, I can safely say that Luke Charter has got the longest penis I've ever seen in the showers. In terms of the biggest bloke, Roman Taufafenua was my second row buddy in Toulon. I'm a tight head lock. I'm a scrummaging lock. I'm 120 kilos. I'm 6'7". I'm usually in terms of the Premiership, I'm one of the biggest locks around. He made me feel like a scrum half. He was like 6'9", 6'10", 145 kilos. He was an absolute, just a huge person. Easily biggest. Not in the gym at all. You often find with the big lads, particularly, that there's nothing special about them in the gym. They're not bench pressing massive weight or anything like that. The other one was Will Skelton. I remember in an England Australia game, Will Skelton was playing for Australia, and I was at guard just beside the ruck, just the kind of normal ruck defence, a pretty sensible position for someone like me to be in. And Will Skelton came at the line, took a little ball off of Nick Phipps or Will Genya, whoever it was, and he absolutely just steamrolled me. And that's never happened in my entire career. No one has ever bundled me over like that. ever. It's just something I'd never experienced before. I didn't know what to do with myself. It was very disheartening as a big man to have just been like ragdolled.
Questions, guys? Or we can wrap up. Chaps, if there's nothing else in terms of burning questions, we'll say thank you ever so much to Dave for his time. And I hope you managed to pick up some drinking tips in amongst some performance tips there. And I'm sure Dave would welcome any questions in terms of career transition stuff. If you think of something in the future, then fire it on to me and I'll pass it on to Dave. Going to certainly invite Dave to the Twickenham dinner on May the 21st, depending on availability. We launch our 1876 club then, and hopefully we'll have an end of year club dinner as well. So we'll see what we can do in terms of timing to get down and support you for a game and then get into black tie and get to an event after.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Thanks very much for having me. Lovely to meet you all. Hopefully we can share a beer at some point in the future.
Cheers, Dave. Appreciate it.
Cheers, lads.
Cheers, Chatwood.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers, Dave.
Cheers. Cheers.
Cheers.